Later, as she packed her keyboard and prepared to leave, a judge approached her. The expression on their face was a mix of seriousness and respect. "You have a gift," they said quietly. "Not just for playing, but for understanding music in a way few do. Your ability to turn limitations into artistry is rare. Keep following this path. It will take you far." Her heart raced. She had hoped for recognition, but to hear it so clearly from someone experienced and respected was overwhelming. She nodded, words failing her for a moment, feeling the truth of their statement settle in her chest. Walking home through the quiet streets, she felt a sense of peace she had never known. The day had been intense, emotional, and exhausting, yet profoundly rewarding. She realized that her fear, her doubts, and even the broken piano had played a role in this experience. Each obstacle had been a teacher, each challenge a lesson in resilience and creativity. She thought about how easily people judge others, assuming abilities or limitations based on appearances. Today had shown her that talent, courage, and heart could defy expectation in ways that astonish and inspire. When she returned to her small apartment, she set her keyboard on the table and sat down, letting her fingers rest lightly on the keys. She began to play softly, not for an audience, not for recognition, but for herself. The notes filled the room, carrying the calm and satisfaction of accomplishment. She felt a deep connection to the music, a bond that transcended fear and doubt. The experience at the recital had shown her the power of perseverance, adaptation, and self-belief. She knew that this performance was just the beginning of a journey that would continue to grow and evolve. The days that followed brought unexpected opportunities. A local music teacher who had attended the recital reached out, expressing interest in mentoring her further. A small community center invited her to perform for charity events, recognizing the authenticity and emotion she brought to her music. She even received inquiries from local media, curious about the young pianist who had captivated the town with a broken instrument. Though these opportunities were exciting, she approached them with humility, focusing on the music itself rather than the attention it brought. Her priority remained the joy of playing, the connection her music could create, and the growth she could achieve. She continued to practice, exploring new compositions and refining her technique, but always with the awareness that music was more than notes and rhythm. It was expression, communication, and a way to touch others in ways words could not. The broken piano had taught her that imperfection could be a source of creativity, challenges could inspire innovation, and that courage often leads to unexpected triumph. These lessons stayed with her as she moved forward, shaping not only her music but her outlook on life. Over time, she became known for her ability to transform ordinary instruments into vessels of extraordinary music. People sought her out for performances, not because she had perfect technique, but because she had the ability to convey emotion, tell stories through sound, and inspire others with her resilience. Her story spread quietly at first, then more widely, as those who had witnessed her performance shared their amazement. She became a symbol of determination and the transformative power of embracing challenges. Yet, despite recognition and opportunities, she remained grounded. She continued to work at the cafe when needed, finding balance between her responsibilities and her passion. Music was her anchor, a constant source of comfort and purpose. Every time she played, whether in front of an audience or alone in her apartment, she remembered the broken piano, the skepticism of others, and the courage it had taken to perform. These memories fueled her dedication and deepened her connection to the art she loved. She often thought about the audience, people who had doubted her, and the lessons they had unknowingly taught her. Their skepticism had been a mirror, reflecting the strength and creativity within her. She realized that true success was not measured by others' approval, but by the ability to stay true to oneself, to rise above fear, and to create something meaningful despite obstacles. This realization shaped her approach to life and music, guiding her with a quiet confidence and unwavering determination. Years later, when she looked back on that first recital, she remembered the nervous anticipation, the broken piano, and the transformative experience of performing under pressure. It was a defining moment, a turning point that had revealed her resilience, talent, and the power of embracing challenges. She carried the lessons from that day into every performance, every composition, and every interaction, knowing that courage, perseverance, and authenticity could overcome even the most daunting obstacles. And so, she continued her journey, quietly inspiring others through her music and her story. She had been underestimated, faced obstacles that seemed insurmountable, and yet had triumphed in a way that resonated deeply with everyone who witnessed her. The broken piano had become a symbol not of limitation but of possibility. Her journey was a testament to the human spirit, a reminder that passion, courage, and perseverance could transform fear into beauty, doubt into admiration, and ordinary moments into extraordinary experiences. In the end, she played not just for applause, but for the music itself, and through it, she touched lives in ways that would be remembered for years to come. The audience was captivated. People who had been skeptical at the start now sat in rapt attention. They leaned forward in their chairs, eyes wide, as though trying to drink in every note. Some whispered to each other in astonishment, realizing that the music they heard was not just technically skillful, but deeply moving. The performance seemed to transcend the limitations of the piano, as if she had found a way to speak directly to the hearts of those in the room. She moved into the middle section of her piece, which required more complex chords and rapid sequences of notes. Each hand moved independently, each finger finding its own place on the keys, adjusting instantly to the piano's quirks. When a key stuck, she modified her approach, turning a potential mistake into a deliberate flourish. When a note sounded harsh, she softened the touch to blend it into the melody. Her mind and fingers worked in perfect harmony, guided by intuition and years of silent practice. The audience responded subtly at first, soft gasps of admiration, nods of appreciation, eyes shining with emotion. But as she continued, the reaction grew stronger. People who had doubted her talent were now leaning forward, completely absorbed. Some had tears in their eyes, moved by the unexpected beauty that emerged from a broken instrument and a quiet young woman they had underestimated. The skeptics could no longer hide their surprise, their disbelief giving way to admiration. She paused for a brief moment, letting a chord linger, feeling the resonance in the room. The silence that followed was heavy, but respectful, a testament to the power of what she was creating. Then she continued, her music flowing more confidently than ever. She played with abandon now, letting the piano's idiosyncrasies shape her expression, improvising small variations that added depth and emotion. The broken keys became accents, the uneven tones added texture, and her creativity shone through in every measure. The judges, who had initially appeared distant and reserved, were now fully engaged. Their eyes followed her hands closely, noting the precision and artistry involved in adapting her performance on the fly. They whispered to each other occasionally, exchanging impressed glances. They had expected a modest, perhaps flawed performance. But what they were witnessing was extraordinary, a young woman transforming challenge into beauty, fear into courage, limitation into opportunity. She could sense the audience leaning in, feeling the connection between the music and their emotions. The piece moved through delicate, soft passages that felt intimate and personal, then swelled into powerful, dramatic moments that filled the room with energy. The contrast between gentle and bold, subtle and intense, captured the full spectrum of human emotion. She had become a storyteller through her piano, and the audience was hanging on every word of the tale. Her own heart raced with excitement and fulfillment. She had faced the broken piano, the audience's doubts, and her own fear, and turned them into a performance that spoke of resilience, courage, and creativity. Every note was a triumph, every chord a victory over the obstacles she had feared would defeat her. She felt a profound sense of joy, knowing that she was expressing herself fully, without compromise. And the audience was responding with genuine emotion as she moved into the final section. The music reached its emotional peak. She played with a combination of technical skill and heartfelt expression that made the melody soar. Her hands moved with confidence and elegance, each note deliberate, each pause meaningful. The piano, once a source of frustration, now sang under her touch, its imperfections adding depth and character to the performance. The audience was completely immersed, experiencing a connection that went beyond words. Some people held their breath, captivated by the unexpected beauty unfolding before them. Others smiled, tears glistening in their eyes, feeling the emotion that emanated from the music. The young pianist could sense their admiration, their astonishment at what she had accomplished. She had taken a broken instrument and, through sheer determination, skill, and creativity, turned it into a source of awe and inspiration. The room seemed to vibrate with energy, a shared experience between the performer and the audience. They were no longer mere spectators. They were participants in the music, carried along by the story she told with her hands. The skepticism that had greeted her arrival had vanished, replaced by wonder and respect. Every note, every chord, every flourish had contributed to a performance that would be remembered, not for its perfection, but for its honesty, passion, and ingenuity. She felt a surge of confidence as she approached the closing moments of her piece. The final chords required precision and emotional depth, a careful balance of strength and sensitivity. She played with intent, letting the piano's quirks guide her expression rather than hinder it. Each note resonated with meaning, each pause added to the impact. And the audience responded with a collective awareness of the extraordinary effort and talent on display. The last note lingered in the air, a gentle vibration that seemed to settle over the entire hall. Silence followed for a heartbeat, a moment of suspended awe. Then, slowly, the applause began. At first polite and cautious, then growing louder, stronger, and more heartfelt. People rose to their feet, cheering and clapping, some wiping tears from their eyes, others smiling broadly with amazement. The young pianist felt a wave of relief and joy. Knowing that she had succeeded in a way she could never have imagined, she bowed deeply, acknowledging the audience's appreciation. Feeling the warmth and respect radiating from every corner of the room, the critics and judges looked on, impressed and moved. Recognizing the artistry, courage, and creativity that had carried her through the performance. She had faced every challenge, adapted to every difficulty, and emerged with a performance that transcended expectation. The broken piano, once a symbol of fear and limitation, had become a testament to her resilience and talent. Walking off the stage, she felt a mixture of exhaustion, exhilaration, and pride. The experience had tested her in ways she had never imagined, pushing her to adapt, improvise, and express herself fully. The applause still echoed in her ears, a reminder that she had transformed doubt into admiration, limitation into beauty, and fear into triumph. She had shown that talent, dedication, and courage could overcome even the most daunting obstacles, leaving a lasting impression on everyone who had witnessed her performance. As she stepped off the stage, the warmth of the applause still ringing in her ears, she felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. Her legs were weak, her fingers slightly sore from the intense focus, but her heart was light with a sense of accomplishment she had never known before. The audience had witnessed something rare, a performance that had overcome expectation and limitation, transforming what seemed like a flaw into beauty. She had done more than play a piano. She had shared her story, her courage, and her passion. People had listened. Backstage, she was met with smiles and quiet congratulations from the other performers. Some of them, who had at first regarded her with polite curiosity or even mild amusement, now looked at her with genuine admiration. One of the more experienced musicians approached her, offering a small nod of respect and a few encouraging words. "That was remarkable," they said. "You turned every challenge into music. That takes skill and heart." She smiled a little shyly, feeling the warmth of genuine recognition. It was different from applause. This was acknowledgement of her craft and her spirit. She returned to the empty corner of the backstage area, leaning against the wall and letting herself breathe. Her mind replayed the performance, each note, each improvisation, each moment of fear transformed into triumph. She had adapted to the broken piano, creating a sound that was uniquely her own. She had faced the skeptics, the doubters, and even her own anxiety, and had come through with something beautiful. The reality of it made her chest swell with quiet pride when she finally found a moment of solitude. She allowed herself to reflect on what had happened. The broken piano had seemed like an insurmountable obstacle, but it had forced her to think creatively, to trust her instincts, and to embrace imperfection. In doing so, she had discovered a freedom in her music she had never experienced before. The performance had not been flawless in the traditional sense, but it had been honest, passionate, and alive. And in that honesty, she had connected with her audience in a profound way. As the crowd began to leave, many approached her, offering compliments, handshakes, and words of appreciation. Some shared how moved they had been, describing feelings they could not quite put into words. Others expressed surprise that someone they had expected to falter had instead delivered a performance that lingered in their minds long after the last note. She listened, thanked them politely, and smiled, feeling a warmth that went deeper than any applause. This was recognition not for her appearance or her background, but for her dedication, talent, and courage. With careful, deliberate movements, she began to play the first few notes of her piece again. This time, there was a steadiness to her touch, quiet confidence that came from knowing she could manage the piano's quirks. The audience, still watching, seemed to lean in, curious to hear how she would handle the uneven keys. Some whispered, questioning whether she would succeed, while others simply sat quietly, captivated by the tentative beauty of the opening notes. Her fingers moved with a blend of caution and artistry. She discovered that certain keys, although sticky, could create unique sounds when pressed lightly. Others required force but produced a fuller tone. Slowly, she adjusted, weaving the oddities of the piano into the melody she had practiced. Each challenge became an opportunity, each limitation a tool to express something new. Her music, once rehearsed and precise, began to take on a life of its own, evolving as she played. Shaped by both her skill and the piano's imperfections, the audience began to notice the subtle transformation. What had started as a cautious, almost timid performance began to grow richer and more compelling. The uneven tones added texture. The irregularities made the melody more human, more relatable. People leaned forward, drawn into the unexpected depth of sound. Some murmured softly, their voices tinged with surprise and admiration. The young pianist felt the energy of the room shift. The doubt and skepticism that had weighed so heavily were slowly giving way to attention and wonder. Her heart raced, but it was no longer from fear. It was excitement, a rush of exhilaration that came from conquering the challenge and turning it into something beautiful. She let herself be carried by the music, following the flow of her fingers and the nuances of the piano. She had to think ahead, anticipate the quirks of each key, and adapt instantly, but she felt in control. The room was full of people, yet at that moment, it felt as if it existed only for her and the music she was creating. The melody grew stronger, more expressive. She allowed herself small improvisations, adjusting transitions to fit the piano's responses. The sticky keys became accents, the uneven tones added emotion, and the strange timbre of some notes enhanced the depth of her piece. It was not what she had originally planned, but it was better in a way she had never imagined. She realized that perfection was not the goal. Connection was, and with each note, she felt the audience connecting with her music, responding in ways that were deeply human and immediate. People began to respond more openly. A soft gasp here, a gentle nod there, as the audience recognized the courage and creativity involved in her performance. She could feel their admiration growing, even if unspoken. The whispers of doubt had vanished, replaced by attentive silence, broken only by the occasional soft exclamation of surprise at a particularly moving passage. She had captured their attention, and more importantly, their respect. The judges, who had seemed reserved and professional at first, were now fully engaged. They watched her hands closely, noting the precision and adaptability required to navigate the broken piano. Her ability to improvise, to reshape her music on the fly while maintaining its emotional impact, was a display of skill that went beyond technical proficiency. It was artistry, born from necessity and fueled by passion. The initial doubts they might have held were replaced by recognition, silent acknowledgement of her talent. The young pianist felt a wave of confidence sweep over her. The fear that had gripped her moments earlier was gone, replaced by a sense of purpose. She was not just playing notes. She was telling a story, sharing her emotions, and transforming the limitations of the piano into a unique voice. Each chord carried her courage, each melody her resilience. She played with a freedom she had never known, a sense of possibility that came from embracing the challenge rather than fearing it. As she continued, the audience became more engaged. Eyes followed her hands, hearts responded to the ebb and flow of the music, and some even leaned forward as if trying to catch every nuance. People who had been skeptical were now captivated, drawn into the performance by the honesty and emotion of her playing. The piano, once a source of anxiety, had become a partner, its flaws giving her music, character, and depth. She moved into the more complex sections of her piece, requiring even greater focus and adaptability. The sticky keys demanded quick adjustments, the uneven tones careful management. She anticipated the resistance, adjusted her touch, and allowed the music to flow despite the challenges. The audience watched in awe, sensing the mastery required to turn a flawed instrument into a vehicle for such expressive performance. Some whispered encouragement to themselves, caught up in the unfolding transformation. For the first time, she truly felt the power of music as a language of emotion. The technical difficulties no longer intimidated her. They inspired creativity and spontaneity. She explored the piano's limitations, finding ways to make them work for her rather than against her. The melody shifted subtly, the harmonies took on a new color, and the performance became uniquely hers, a testament to her ingenuity and courage. The room was alive with quiet energy, the audience leaning in, listening intently. The initial skepticism had turned to curiosity, then to admiration, and now to a collective sense of wonder. The young pianist could feel their engagement, their emotional response, and it fueled her further. Each note was an invitation, each chord a bridge connecting her world to theirs. She was no longer just performing. She was communicating, sharing a part of herself in a way that words never could. Her hands moved with confidence and precision. Navigating the piano's quirks with skill and creativity, she adjusted her piece in real time, improvising transitions, emphasizing melodies, and turning obstacles into opportunities. The music flowed, dynamic and expressive, carrying the weight of her emotions and the story of her journey. She had found her rhythm, her voice, and the audience could feel it. They were no longer thinking about the broken piano or her modest appearance. They were experiencing the music, captivated by its beauty and honesty. As she reached the climax of her piece, the emotional intensity grew. The music swelled, carrying a sense of triumph, resilience, and hope. Each note rang out with clarity. Each chord resonated with meaning. The audience was spellbound, some leaning forward in anticipation, others closing their eyes to fully absorb the sound. The young pianist felt a surge of exhilaration and fulfillment. She had transformed fear into artistry, limitations into beauty, doubt into admiration. The final section required careful control and emotional depth. She played with a delicate balance, managing the piano's quirks while maintaining the integrity of her music. Every note was intentional, every pause meaningful. The audience remained silent, hanging on to the unfolding performance, fully aware of the skill and courage involved. The judges, now fully attentive, took notes and exchanged quiet glances, recognizing the talent before them. They had expected a timid, flawed performance, but instead, they witnessed creativity, resilience, and expressive mastery. She brought the piece to a close with a final, gentle chord. The room held its breath for a moment, the silence thick with anticipation. Then, slowly, the first claps began, hesitant at first, then growing louder and stronger. The audience erupted in applause, some standing, some cheering quietly, all moved by the unexpected brilliance of her performance. The young pianist felt a wave of relief and joy wash over her. She had done it. She had turned a broken piano into a source of beauty and connection, captivating everyone in the room as she stood and bowed. She noticed the expressions of admiration and respect on the faces of those who had doubted her. The skeptics were silent, stunned, and some even smiled in acknowledgement. She had faced the impossible and transformed it into something extraordinary. Her heart swelled with pride and gratitude. The music had spoken, and the audience had listened. Understanding the dedication, courage, and passion that lay behind every note. Walking off the stage, she felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. She had faced her fear, adapted to the challenges of a broken piano, and created a performance that resonated deeply with everyone present. The applause followed her, echoing in her ears, a reminder that true artistry comes from the heart and cannot be measured by appearances or expectations. She had found her rhythm, her voice, and the courage to share it with the world. Even in the face of doubt and difficulty, the room was quiet except for the music that filled it, a sound that seemed to grow stronger and more vivid with every passing moment. She could feel the audience's attention, their eyes fixed on her hands as they danced across the keys, coaxing a melody from an instrument that had seemed impossible to tame. Each note carried emotion. Every chord expressed a story, and the broken piano, once a source of fear, now became an instrument of wonder. She played with her eyes closed, letting the rhythm guide her. The initial hesitancy had disappeared, replaced by fluidity and confidence. The keys, though stubborn, responded to her determination and sensitivity. She discovered that the imperfections added character to her music, creating nuances she had never imagined. What had seemed like a weakness became a unique strength, giving her performance a raw authenticity that touched everyone listening. Her stomach dropped at the sight of it. She had expected challenges, yes, but not this. The piano was supposed to be a reliable instrument, a partner for her music, not a barrier. She pressed a key gently and winced at the harsh, uneven note that rang out. She tried another, then another. Some keys barely responded, while others made strange, discordant sounds. Panic bubbled up inside her, threatening to consume her confidence. This piano could ruin everything. Her dreams of sharing her music, of showing people what she could do, seemed to crumble right there on the stage. The hall was filling with people. Chairs creaked under the weight of expectant audience members, and soft whispers drifted through the room. She knew they were talking about her, noticing her modest clothing, her shy demeanor, and now the condition of her instrument. Some of them might even be relieved, anticipating a performance that would match the piano's poor state. She took a deep breath and reminded herself that the piano was just a tool. It was the music she carried inside that mattered most. She ran her fingers lightly over the keys, testing them one by one, trying to find a rhythm and balance that would allow her to play her piece. It was difficult, even painful, to adjust to each unexpected resistance, to force the notes to speak in the way she intended. Every time a key stuck or sounded wrong, she felt a spike of frustration. She had practiced for years, and yet it seemed as if the instrument itself was challenging her determination. She considered leaving, deciding that maybe today was not her day, and maybe it would be better to wait for a piano that could support her music properly. But something deep inside her refused to give up. She reminded herself of why she was there. This was not about the applause or the recognition, although that would be nice. This was about music, about speaking through notes and chords, about letting her feelings flow into a world that often ignored her quiet existence. She had overcome challenges before. Every keyboard she had practiced on at home had been imperfect, some with missing keys, some with uneven sounds. She had learned to adapt, to shape her music to the instrument, instead of allowing the instrument to shape her. This was just another challenge, another puzzle to solve. The other performers arrived and began to practice briefly before their turns. They were polished, confident, and used to playing on instruments that responded perfectly to every touch. She watched them from behind the stage, feeling a mix of admiration and envy. Their notes were smooth, clear, and flowing, while hers would have to fight for every sound. Some of the audience members whispered to each other, noting the contrast between the confident musicians and the quiet girl standing by the broken piano. The whispers were sharp, like invisible needles, reminding her of the skepticism she would face. They expected her to fail. She set her fingers on the keys again, this time taking a slow, steady approach. She began to explore the piano, learning how each stubborn key could be coaxed into producing the right tone. She found that certain combinations worked, certain rhythms made the notes sound less jarring, and little by little, she discovered a way to adapt her piece to the piano's limitations. It was not easy, and it would never be perfect, but it was possible. And that possibility was enough to keep her going as the recital time approached. She felt the tension in her chest tighten, a knot of nerves and excitement intertwined. The audience was seated now, the murmurs growing faint as they settled in for the performances. Some faces in the crowd were curious, others doubtful, and a few held expressions of mild amusement, as if they were already certain of her failure. The weight of their expectations, or lack of them, pressed down on her, but she held her ground. She was ready to face them, ready to show that music could transcend appearances, could survive even a broken piano. When her turn was announced, she walked slowly onto the stage, her worn keyboard case in hand. The spotlight shone down on her, bright and hot, making her cheeks warm with embarrassment and nerves. She set the keyboard down, adjusted the bench, and took a moment to center herself. The audience's eyes were on her now, some curious, some skeptical, some quietly judging. She felt their expectations like a tangible weight, but reminded herself that she was here to play, not to prove herself to them. The first note she played was tentative, hesitant, struggling against the sticky key beneath her finger. A murmur ran through the audience, a soft mix of surprise and doubt, but she did not pull back. She adjusted her hand, tried another approach, and slowly began to coax a clear tone from the stubborn instrument. Each note was a small victory, a sign that she could indeed communicate through this imperfect piano. Her confidence began to grow, just a little. With every chord she successfully played, she noticed the faces in the crowd shifting as she continued. Some leaned forward, intrigued despite themselves. Some murmured to each other, realizing that the girl they had expected to stumble was finding a rhythm, a way to make the piano cooperate. The critics at the front row watched closely, their expressions inscrutable, but attentive. Every note she played was a battle, but with each small victory, the battle seemed a little more manageable. She felt her nerves slowly give way to focus, her fear replaced by determination. Her hands moved with careful precision, adjusting to the piano's quirks. A key that refused to sound properly was avoided. Another was pressed lightly to produce a subtle tone. She had to rethink parts of her piece on the spot, improvising little transitions to make the music flow despite the instrument's flaws. It was exhausting, mentally and physically, but it was also exhilarating. She had never felt more alive than she did at that moment. Fully immersed in the challenge and the music, the audience began to notice something unusual. The music was not perfect, but it was beautiful. The slight irregularities in the piano's tone gave the performance a raw, honest quality that seemed to speak directly to the heart. People leaned in, listening more intently, caught up in the emotion that poured from her fingers. The whispers of doubt faded, replaced by awe and curiosity. The broken piano, which had seemed like an obstacle, became part of the story, adding texture and depth to the music she played. Even the judges, who had been reserved and professional up to this point, could not hide their attention. They watched her hands, noting the precision and creativity required to adapt her performance to such a difficult instrument. They exchanged glances, silent acknowledgement passing between them. This was not the performance they had expected, and yet it was compelling in a way that could not be denied. She pressed on, her confidence growing with every chord, every melody line that came together despite the piano's flaws. The nerves that had gripped her chest earlier were replaced by a calm focus, a connection to the music that transcended fear. The broken keys were no longer obstacles. They were part of her canvas, and she was painting a picture with sound that was uniquely her own. Each note carried her courage, her determination, and her unspoken story. By the time she finished the first section of her piece, the audience was completely engaged. They listened intently, some holding their breath, captivated by the transformation taking place. What had started as a moment of panic and doubt had become a display of adaptability, skill, and raw emotion. She realized that the broken piano, once her greatest fear, had become a vehicle for her music to speak even more profoundly than she had imagined. As she prepared for the next section, she felt a sense of exhilaration mixed with exhaustion. Playing on this piano required constant attention, constant problem-solving, and constant courage. Every note was a choice, every chord a small victory over the limitations she faced. And yet in that struggle, she found a freedom she had never known. The music was hers fully and completely, shaped by her will, her creativity, and her heart. The audience began to react in subtle ways, soft gasps at a particularly moving sequence, smiles of appreciation at clever transitions, even tears quietly forming in some eyes. She could sense the disbelief fading, replaced by respect and admiration. They had expected a failure, a timid performance that matched her quiet demeanor. Instead, they were witnessing a young woman who could take a broken piano and create something that resonated with everyone listening by the time she stepped back from the keyboard for a brief pause. She felt a wave of relief and pride. She had faced her fear, confronted the challenge of an imperfect instrument, and found a way to express herself despite it. The audience's reaction, their attentive silence and subtle encouragement, gave her the strength to continue. She knew the road ahead in this performance would be difficult, but she also knew that she was ready to meet it head-on, using every ounce of skill, courage, and passion she possessed. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting her hands hover over the keys as though listening to the piano itself. Each note was a challenge, yet she felt a strange rhythm in the uneven sounds. She remembered the countless hours at home, practicing on imperfect instruments, learning to adapt and bend the music to fit the limitations she had. This piano was no different, she realized. Its flaws were just part of the challenge, and she could work with them, not against them. She had always been quiet, almost invisible in the busy cafe where she worked. Every morning she would tie her hair back, put on her apron, and move with practiced precision between tables and counters. Customers barely noticed her unless they needed an order taken or a coffee refilled. Most people assumed she was just another face in the crowd, a girl with a shy smile and soft hands that moved quickly but unnoticed. Few guessed that beneath that quiet exterior, she carried a world of music inside her. Music had been her companion for as long as she could remember. From the time she was a small child, she had been drawn to the piano. She would sit for hours on an old upright at her grandmother's house, her fingers learning the keys as though they were a part of her own body. The piano was a place where she could breathe, a space where the world's weight did not press down on her shoulders. It was the only place where she felt completely herself. But life had a way of complicating dreams. Money was always tight, and she had to help support her family. The piano that once stood proudly in her childhood home had been sold years ago, leaving her practice to be done on second-hand keyboards with keys that sometimes stuck or refused to produce sound. It was not ideal, but she learned to adapt, finding joy in every note she could coax out of the imperfect instruments. She even began writing her own small compositions, little songs that reflected the highs and lows of her life. Even though she worked long hours at the cafe, she never let go of her music. On her lunch breaks, she would sit in the empty back room, her fingers moving over the portable keyboard she had saved for months to buy. She had no audience, no applause, just the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the occasional clatter of dishes from the main room. Yet she played as though the world was listening, letting every note carry her emotions, her hopes, and her fears. Her coworkers hardly knew about her talent. To them, she was quiet, polite, and efficient. Some even teased her gently for being so serious all the time, never imagining that the same hands that poured coffee so gracefully could produce music that could stop hearts. The thought of performing in public was almost frightening to her. She had seen people judged and criticized harshly, and the idea of being laughed at made her stomach twist. Yet, deep inside, she dreamed of a day when someone might hear her play and understand the world she lived in through music. It was that dream that led her to the small music event being held at the town hall. She had heard about it from a friend, someone who knew about her secret passion, The event was open to everyone, amateurs and professionals alike. But she knew most of the attention would go to the formally trained musicians, the ones who wore smart clothes and carried themselves with the confidence of people used to being admired. She felt a flicker of doubt in her chest. She did not belong in that world, not really. She belonged to the quiet rooms and worn keyboards, the kind of places where music was private, not performed for applause. Still, she signed up. She did not tell anyone at the cafe. They would not understand, and she did not want their pity or false encouragement. This was something she had to do for herself. The day of the event, she arrived early, carrying her modest keyboard in a worn case. She found a quiet corner behind the stage where she could adjust her instrument and breathe before stepping into the light. The hall was already filling with people. Chairs creaked under the weight of anticipation. The air was thick with the smell of polished wood and faint perfume. She listened to the other performers, each one more confident than the last. They played fast, intricate pieces, some with flair, others with a precision that left the audience murmuring in approval. She felt her stomach tighten, her nerves clenching like a fist around her heart. They would notice her plain clothing, her simple case, the way she fidgeted with her hands. They would judge her before she even played a single note. And yet she also noticed something else. The judges, sitting in the front row, seemed polite but distant, their eyes scanning the room with practiced indifference. The audience leaned in when a piano sang, their smiles quick to form for those they expected to impress. She realized suddenly that they had made their minds up already. They thought she would fail. She took a deep breath, closing her eyes for a moment. The memories of her childhood piano lessons flooded back. The way her grandmother's eyes would light up when she played a difficult piece, the way she would tap out rhythms on the kitchen table when she did not have access to the piano. This was not about applause. This was not about proving them wrong. This was about music itself, about letting the sound of her heart reach others, even if they were not expecting it. When her name was called, she stepped onto the stage with careful steps. The lights were brighter than she had anticipated, and the murmur of the audience seemed louder, almost overwhelming. She carried her keyboard to the center and set it down with hands that trembled slightly. The room seemed to hush, the anticipatory silence pressing down on her shoulders. She looked out and saw faces she did not know, some curious, some skeptical, and a few whispering to each other with raised eyebrows. They were all thinking the same thing. This quiet, unassuming girl could not possibly hold their attention with her music. She adjusted the seat, her fingers hovering above the keys. Her heart pounded, each beat echoing in her chest like a drum. For a moment, she felt the weight of every doubt, every whispered insult from people who had judged her in the past, every glance that had underestimated her. And then, she let go. She let the memory of her countless hours of practice, her love for music, and her desire to create something beautiful take over. The first note she played was soft, almost timid, but it carried a clarity that made the audience lean in without realizing it. She began to play a simple melody, one that had been in her mind for weeks. It was not flashy, not complicated, but it was honest. The notes stumbled at first, uncertain under her fingers, but she adapted, letting the rhythm grow naturally. Her hands moved as though they knew the way, guided by something deeper than technique, something that only comes from years of silent devotion. A few people whispered. Some chuckled quietly, expecting a failure. But as she continued, the melody grew stronger, more confident. The room began to change. The murmurs softened, replaced by a sense of curiosity, then admiration. Eyes that had been rolling in anticipation now widened. People leaned forward, drawn in by the unexpected beauty of the music. She could feel the energy of the room shifting, and with it, her own confidence blossomed. She closed her eyes and let herself feel the music entirely. Every emotion she had bottled up over the years, the fears, the hopes, the quiet moments of joy poured out through her fingertips. The audience could not ignore it. They could not laugh at something that spoke directly to the heart. The notes floated in the air, wrapping around every listener, filling the hall with a sound that was both delicate and powerful. For the first time in a long while, she did not feel invisible. She felt seen. Not because she had tried to impress anyone, but because she had been true to herself. The people who had doubted her could not hide their astonishment. Their eyes followed her hands, their lips parted in surprise. And even the judges leaned forward, paying attention to every nuance of the performance. She had expected doubt, maybe even ridicule. But what she had instead was silence filled with wonder. By the time she played the final note, the room held its breath for a moment, as if no one wanted to break the spell. Then, slowly, the applause began. At first, tentative, polite, and then growing louder, stronger, more genuine. People clapped and cheered, some standing, some wiping tears from their eyes. She had not just played a song, she had shared a piece of her soul. She opened her eyes, and the sight of the audience, truly listening, truly moved, made her chest swell with a mixture of relief and joy. She realized that the judgments of others did not matter as much as the courage to play. She had faced the doubts, the whispers, the sneers, and had created something that could not be ignored. The quiet girl who had been underestimated had, at least for a few minutes, transformed the room with music. When she left the stage, she carried with her not only the warmth of applause, but the knowledge that her talent was real, her dedication meaningful, and her music capable of touching lives. That night, as she returned to her modest apartment, she sat by the window and played quietly on her small keyboard. This time, there was no audience. No fear, no judgment, only the sound of her heart and the knowledge that she had begun a journey that would never truly end. The morning of the big recital arrived with a quiet tension that seemed to settle over the town. The young pianist woke early, her mind buzzing with anticipation and a little nervous fear. She had spent hours preparing her music, practicing each note carefully, imagining herself performing flawlessly. But when she arrived at the town hall that morning, she was met with an unexpected problem. The piano waiting for her on the stage was old and worn, with keys that were chipped and uneven, some of them sticking in place or refusing to make a proper sound.